Moving on to 21.3 here. So it says sketching solutions to inequalities. It says here's a graph that represents solutions to the equation x minus y equals 5. In order to understand how to do all of these inequalities that we're about to do, we have to first understand how to graph the line x minus y equals 5. The book below already gives us that graph, okay? But later in quizzes and later in tests, we are going to have to learn how to do this, okay? So I've broken it down step by step on how to graph this equation, okay? So if we graph this equation, the first thing that we would let x be 0. Okay, so what I could do is I could take 0 and I would substitute it right here in for x. What that looks like is 0 minus y equals 5. Okay, if I do that, this 0 minus part, or just this 0 part, is going to disappear, right? We don't care what 0 minus is, so it's going to look something like this. We have negative y equals 5. Okay, we want to know what y is when x is 0, so we don't want to know what negative y is, though. In order to find out what y is, we would just actually take this negative and move it to the other side of the equation, right? There's a step that makes it so we can do this, but in this case, we can just take the negative, move to the other side, and we know that when x is 0, y is negative 5. So the first point we could graph is 0, negative 5. That's this point right here, okay? We're going to do the same thing to get this other point here, this 5, 0, but instead of letting x be 0, we're going to let y be 0. So if we let y be 0, we would put 0 in for this value of y, and it would look something like this. X minus 0 equals 5. Well, if we do the same thing we did here and just get rid of the 0, right, we just have the fact that x is 5. Okay, so when y is 0, x is 5. So what we could do is graph the point 5, 0, right? So the point is 5, 0, and that's that point right there. Okay, so if you understand how to do that, it's going to make graphing these inequalities a lot easier, because every single one of these inequalities is going to use the fact that this line exists, right? It's just going to look a little different each time. The big thing that we do need to know, though, before we do anything, it says sketch 4 quick graphs representing the solutions to each of these inequalities. Before you sketch these, what I want you to do is I want you to write down this, okay? Because this is the big important idea, is that when we're graphing inequalities, if you use this sign or this sign, what we're going to do is we're going to graph it with a dotted line. If we use this sign or this sign, we're going to graph it with a solid line, okay? So knowing those facts, we can go back over to our graph here, and we can graph the point, or graph this line, right? Remember this line back here. We're going to graph this line with this inequality sign. So we're going to make the line the same, but the only thing that's going to look different when we graph it is because of this inequality sign, we're going to be graphing a dotted line, okay? So I know there's a lot of stuff here, right? And I'm going to explain it piece by piece, okay? So what I did is I graphed the points negative 5 and 5. I connect them with that dotted line. Here, we're going to cover that up, okay? Next, what I have to do after I connected those 2 points with the dotted line is you're probably wondering where this shading comes from. Okay, so the shading comes from testing a point. I always say that I use my test point 0, 0. So 0, 0 is at the origin, it's right here. And what I do is I test this point. Okay, so I bring it back up into my inequality. That's what's over here. And I put 0 in for x, and I put 0 in for y. So when you do that, you get 0 minus 0 is less than 5. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break that down a little more. 0 minus 0 is 0. So this inequality turns into 0 is less than 5. Okay, that is a true inequality. 0 is less than 5. Okay, because this inequality is true, this is what I write here. What I would do is I would shade over the point 0, 0. The point 0, 0 is right here. That's why I chose to shade above my line, because it made a true inequality. Anytime it makes a true inequality, you shade over your test point. My test point is above the line. That is why I shaded above the line. Okay, we're going to try it again. So look over here. We have the inequality x minus y is now less than or equal to 5. Okay, if we take a look, the less than or equal to sign tells us that we need to graph a solid line. Okay, so I'm going to graph that same line we graphed before, just like this one, but instead we're going to use a solid line. And we still have to figure out the shading now. So I know you can tell that my shading is above the line right now. Again, what I did is I used 0, 0 as my test point. I put it into this inequality. I put x or 0 in for x and 0 in for y. What that got me is 0 minus 0 is less than or equal to 5. Again, breaking that down further, 0 minus 0 is 0. So I would have the inequality. 0 is less than or equal to 5. That is a true statement. So because that's true, again, 0, 0, the point right here, is above my line. So I had to shade above my line because it made a true inequality. Okay, and we're going to take a look at some more of them. We have the inequality x minus y is greater than 5. Again, with this symbol, I have to graph a dotted line. I graphed the same line that I graphed right here. The only thing that's different here is where the shading's at. And I'll explain this. So, the reason I shaded underneath my line is because I use 0, 0 as my test point. In this inequality here, I put 0 in for x and 0 in for y. Okay, that got me 0 minus 0 is greater than 5. If I break down the left side, 0 minus 0 is 0. And I now have the inequality 0 is greater than 5. 0 is not greater than 5. That is a false inequality. Because I use 0, 0 as my test point, I'm not going to shade over the part of the line that has 0, 0. 0, 0 is above my line. Because it made a false inequality, I shade the other side of the line. So that's why I shaded below the line, right? And I wrote that here. So I said false, shade the other side of the line. Okay, take a minute, write that down. If you need to pause, you can pause. But we're going to keep moving. So again, we have the inequality x minus y is greater than or equal to 5. The greater than or equal symbol makes it so that I have to graph a solid line. Again, my solid line looks like that. And again, I use my 0, 0 test point, and it tells me the inequality is 0 is greater than or equal to 5. That's not true. So my test point right here, 0, 0, I don't shade over it. I go to the other side of the line and I shade that. Okay. So if you need to write those down, take a minute, pause it, write that down so you have all that info, and we're going to move on to the back or the next page. So it says for each graph, write an inequality whose solutions are represented by the shaded part of the graph. So this one, I have the basis of the inequality for you. I have x and 3, and we have to put an inequality sign in between. I can see that has a dotted line, so I know that it's not going to have a line under it. And what it's saying is all the values of 3, and if I look here, it looks like all the values of 3 are all the values of x that are greater than 3. So I'm going to use the greater than symbol. The next one is my base is y and -2. So I have this point of y being -2. And it looks like the shaded region is all the stuff lower than -2. So I'll say y is less than -2, but because it has a solid line, I would say less than or equal to -2. Okay? This is the line y is equal to x. It is a dotted line, so I would not put a line underneath my inequality sign. And it looks like all the values that are above this line, so I would say y is greater than x. And then in my last one, again, this line is y equals x, okay? And it is all the values underneath this line. So it's going to be all the values less than this. So I would say y is less than x. And because it is a solid line, I would put a line underneath that. Okay, so make sure you have all of those down, and I will see you in the next video.